I rise before the chamber to support the bill before us. This is House Bill 5498, an act concerning election security and transparency and so on. The bill is a lengthy bill. It's got 30-plus sections in it. I won't belabor it other than to say I do support the items contained therein. The most significant item I think people might be aware of is the recording of the video of absentee ballot drop boxes. There are a number of other very positive procedural items that are contained in the bill regarding the receipt of absentee ballots, setting up folks so that they can have a permanent status to receive an absentee ballot, dealing with SEC complaints. There's a number of sections. I could just go into them, but I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about the underlying bill because I think that the bill has strong, if not unanimous support, and I have no objection to the item itself. My only concern is that I don't believe it goes far enough. I'm very proud to stand up as a member of the Republican Senate caucus and the ranking member of the Government Administration and Elections Committee. And over the last several years, actually, we have been speaking very loudly and repeatedly in an effort to try and improve the integrity of our election process in the state of Connecticut. And we have offered over and over a series of proposals that I believe are necessary to improve the quality and integrity of elections in our state. Unfortunately, they have been neglected and voted down by the majority. They might say on occasion that these bills did not get a public hearing, but I would remind them that these bills didn't get a public hearing because they chose not to give them a public hearing despite my repeated requests. But they absolutely know what these items are. We have offered them repeatedly in this chamber, in committee. We had a press conference in February where we laid these out to the press in great detail, and I'm going to offer 5 amendments in quick succession to give the majority and my colleagues in the minority a final opportunity this session, since we are less than 2 hours away from ending our business for this legislative year. I want to give everyone a final opportunity to do the right thing and vote in favor of these 5 proposals that will improve the integrity of elections in our state and give people back home in all of our districts confidence that when they cast their vote, that their vote counts, and that the election that they're voting in is going to be verified, and that the tallies for each of the candidates are going to be legitimate. With that, Madam President, I'm going to offer the first of my 5 amendments. The clerk is in possession of LCO 5728. I ask that it be called and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5728, Senate Amendment A.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very straightforward amendment. In other states that do a significant amount of mail-in or absentee voting, they are set up for it. They do mail-in and absentee voting based on a series of significant integrity procedures, including what we refer to as signature verification. Other states plan for absentee or mail-in voting is what I'm saying. Effectively, what they do is they know at the time that they actually register the person to vote that they are collecting the information. They're collecting a digital signature so that it can later be verified. I believe that we should have this process in Connecticut. We have the loosest absentee ballot or mail-in voting system in the entire country. It's been plagued with problems for years. Most notably, we saw what happened in the city of Bridgeport earlier this year with the repeated controversial elections for mayor. And I move adoption. I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll have a roll call vote. Will you remark further? Senator Flexer.
My colleagues to reject the amendment.
Thank you. Thank you. The
24. Absent not vote.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to say that I'm surprised, but I'm not. But I am disappointed once again that we were unsuccessful in convincing the majority that the desire to improve our election system and satisfy the concerns of so many people across this state needs to be addressed. been working at this for quite some time, and I continue to try and educate and inform, but unfortunately it doesn't seem to sink in. The second amendment that I've got to offer tonight is regarding photo identification. I don't know if the people listening are aware, but in the state of Connecticut, photo identification is not required to cast a vote, either in person or by absentee. And they may ask you, in fact, for identification when you go to the polls. And in some respects, identification is required, although it does not have to be photo identification. But in fact, even that identification is not required because in Connecticut, we have a mechanism by which you can vote by simply signing a form attesting to the fact that you are who you are. And the sad part about that is that there is almost no verification process that occurs after that fact. There is no, after that day, there is no follow-up, there is no audit, there is no nothing. And I believe that needs to change. I believe that photo identification for voting is something that has been required in other states for years. I believe that it's sensible. I believe the majority of people across Connecticut support it. And I would like, frankly, to put my colleagues on the record. I want us to take an up or down vote on whether or not we're going to have photo ID for voting in Connecticut. If you believe we should have photo ID for voting, simple vote. Vote yes. If you don't think that's a good idea, if you think that it's fine to continue voting without a photo identification, sure, vote no. But the press, I hope, covers this. I hope that the people of Connecticut speak up loud and clear because I know they want to see an amendment like this pass in this chamber. I move for adoption, Madam President, and I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you.
Thank you. You will have a roll call vote, will you, Mr. Clerk?
Senate Amendment B, House Bill 5498. Total number of voters.
Madam President, once again, another vote on another key election integrity item that is necessary to preserve the sanctity of the election process in our state, and sadly, another party line vote. Where the majority, which has a significant majority in Connecticut, 2-1 effectively in this chamber, 24-12, voted on party lines to defeat it. I don't mean to call people out in such bold fashion, Madam President, but I'm frustrated because I believe these are good policy items. I think they are wildly popular in the public, and I believe that our future elections in this state deserve more attention as far as the integrity of those elections. We still don't have a significant change in policy in this state, regardless of all of the news coverage and attention that has surrounded the Bridgeport fiasco. And I'm tired of it, frankly. I want to see something done. And I'm speaking up today, once again, for that purpose. My third amendment, Madam President, is LCO 5738. I ask that the clerk call that amendment, and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize. Thank you.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5738. This is Senate Amendment C.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I got it right that time. I was a little distracted by some lobbying efforts from the executive branch a little while ago. So this particular amendment is very straightforward. This amendment has to do with audits. In other states where they have elections, forget election irregularities, they have audits. They actually go back and make sure that the results of the election are legitimate. They go back and check the results. They do it in a lot of different ways. Sometimes it's done in a random way. We are making some efforts in the state, and I will give some of my colleagues in both parties credit for helping us advance risk-limiting audits and some other things like that. But we are not auditing critical pieces of the election process in the state of Connecticut. We do not audit people that vote with same-day or election day registration. So someone comes in, says who they are, they sign a piece of paper, they register to vote, they vote, and then after the fact, they get a voter registration card in the mail. And if that voter registration card is returned back to the registrar, you know what happens? Nothing. That's unacceptable. We need a process to track those folks and make sure that they were actually legitimate voters. We also do not audit absentee ballots. Now, maybe that wasn't such a big deal when the total vote tally ended up with maybe 2 or 3% of people voting by absentee. But in recent years, that number has gone up above 15%, 20%. And during the pandemic, we had some places where that was 40% of the vote. We've debated the merits of mail-in voting ad nauseum in the state, but at the very least, we should be able to agree that auditing those elections is a legitimate thing that ought to be done to satisfy me and anyone else who's worried that our elections might be tainted, even in a small way. I move adoption, Madam President. I'd like a roll call vote.
Thank you. We will have a roll. Give us the tally.
Senate Amendment C of House Bill 5498. Total number of votes.
Very much, Madam President. I appreciate the recognition. I want to thank one of my Democratic colleagues for crossing over to support that amendment. Maybe we can get more on the next one. The fourth amendment that I'm going to offer tonight to help secure our elections into the future has to do with the unsolicited mailing of absentee ballots. This might be a somewhat more complicated concept, but I want people to understand what's going on here, which is that traditionally people have voted on Election Day in person. And there's only been a small percentage of the population that has voted by absentee, and they've done it traditionally for a good reason. You know, they're out of town, somebody's sick, maybe they're elderly, they can't get to the polls. But it's always been a relatively small number of people involved in voting that way. And I think consequently, the security and integrity of that election process has never really been questioned or tested or verified. And that's a mistake, because in recent years, we've been expanding that type of voting dramatically. And as I mentioned, other states that do mail-in voting, they actually draw special attention to the process because they recognize that it's much more difficult to make sure that everything is on the up and up when you're talking about mailing out voting applications and mailing those back, and then mailing ballots out and then mailing those back. And everything else that's been added, including the mail-in process, drop boxes, and we've seen all of the things that happen with that. Over the years, there have been a number of people convicted in the state of Connecticut for interfering with the mail-in voting process. And that is because, frankly, it's easy to interfere with. And sadly, it generally happens in primary elections, and it typically happens in primary elections in big cities. I don't know why people that are involved in those very elections wouldn't be more concerned about that issue. They should be. And we should all be concerned about making sure that absentee or mail-in voting is as legitimate as it possibly can be. And I have a solution. The majority, generally speaking, whenever I offer one of these amendments, the response is always, oh, well, you're trying to prevent some people from voting. It's voter suppression. Well, that's nonsense, Madam President. That means nothing. That is not true. The fact of the matter is, I want as many people to vote who can lawfully vote as possible. And I want to make it as easy as possible for them also. But I also don't want people that shouldn't be voting to participate. And I don't want people that are engaged in absentee ballot harvesting or any other type of nefarious activities, stuffing drop boxes, etc. I don't want to see that ever again. And I'm sure that the people of the state of Connecticut don't want to see that ever again. Then we have an opportunity to do something about it here. The solution is, instead of allowing candidates in both parties, and sometimes the state or municipalities, to send out mass amounts of absentee ballot applications, we cut that out. And we go back to a system where the voter actually requests the ballot application. Anyone still has the same opportunity, the same broad reasons to engage in mail-in voting. The only difference is that they have to take one tiny step and affirmatively ask for the ballot, which could be done any number of ways. It could be done by mail, it could be done by phone, it could be done by email, it could be done on a website. And I'm open to finding even more ways to make that happen. But the first step is that we've got to stop the wide open process that allows ballot applications to be all over the place. Anyone who's paid attention to what happened in Bridgeport knows that ballot harvesting is a problem in the state of Connecticut. It needs to stop. This amendment will stop that. Did I call the LCO yet?
No, please do.
Thank you very much, Madam President. Got lost in thought. My LCO number for this amendment is 5726. I asked the clerk to call it, and hopefully we can take a vote on it by roll.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO.
I've made my case for the amendment. I encourage and move adoption. And as I said, I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you.
You will have a roll call. Clerk.
Senate Amendment D, House Bill 5498.
Thank you, Madam President. Once again, disappointed but not surprised. I just want to say very clearly that I hope the press is watching. I really do. I am begging for the press to cover this. I think one of the problems we have with the way our state government goes these days is that not enough people are truly informed about what we're voting on up here and the way the votes are going. So I hope there's plenty of reporting on this. I need people across Connecticut to know that there are actually some lawmakers up here who care about the integrity of our elections, who want to see things change, who want to fix the Bridgeport problem. Sadly, another party line vote. And I've been up here for quite a while waiting to have some reserves or backup to help me achieve a majority. So in lieu of that, I'm going to try and make the best arguments that I can to my colleagues in the other party that this shouldn't be about party. We should be voting in favor of these amendments because they're good policy. And that we can disagree about everything under the sun, but the one thing that we should all find a way to agree on is the rules of the game when it comes to how we all get here. The integrity of our elections is something that should be beyond any type of discussion about politics or partisanship. This is something that should be done because it's the right thing to do. With that, Madam President, I have one final amendment. It's LCO 5734. I ask that the clerk call this amendment and I be given leave of the chamber to summarize.
Mr. Clerk.
LCO number 5734, Senate Amendment E.
Senator Sampson.
Thank you very much, Madam President. This is a very, very simple amendment. I mentioned a little while ago that a number of people have been convicted of election fraud in the state of Connecticut. It's funny because when you bring it up, a lot of people say, well, that's never happened. There's no such thing. And I think the Bridgeport saga that we've all been experiencing over the last year or so, in many ways, a terrible and unfortunate stain on our election process in the state of Connecticut, has a side effect that's a positive, and that is a realization that the things that I'm saying here today are true. I've been saying these things since before that happened. And what's really shocking to me is that here I have evidence on video. Numerous redo elections that weren't free, the taxpayers had to pay for. And yet, it doesn't seem to change enough minds up here. This amendment is very simple also. It says that if you are convicted of election fraud, as many folks have been in the past, that there is actually a chance that you might do jail time. Because no one in the state of Connecticut, to my knowledge, has ever served 1 day in jail for interfering with an election. And maybe if they did, there'd be less people inclined to engage in ballot harvesting or interfering with elections in any way. This bill this amendment rather, would create a 12-month mandatory minimum for a series of election-related offenses. And trust me, they were serious offenses, because interfering between you and me with even one vote can change an election. One of the towns I represent is the town of Southington, and just last year there was a election for state representative decided by one vote. One vote can change an election. We cannot take chances that even a single vote is a problem. I've heard the Secretary of State mention a number of times that, well, there's some amount of fraud that's going to occur, as if we're supposed to accept that. I don't accept it. And I believe that people engage in that type of fraud, they ought to have stiff consequences. I move adoption, and I'd like a roll call vote. Thank you.
Clerk.
Senate Amendment E of House Bill 5498, total number voting 30.